All right, welcome everyone to today's edition of the Magnet Marketers Blab, and we are so thrilled to have a special guest with us. We're going to be joined by Bernie Borges today. He's a veteran B2B marketer with a career spanning tech ventures in New York, Silicon Valley, and Florida. He is executive producer of the Social Business Engine and CEO of Find and Convert. Now, just to give you a little detail on that, Social Business Engine is a digital media property with video, podcasts, and journals that showcase thought leaders using social technologies in their business strategies. That's what we're all about here. And Find and Convert is Bernie's digital marketing agency with a focus on content marketing strategy, delivering services primarily to B2B technology and professional service clients across the U.S. He's also an author. He's well-rounded here, author of Marketing 2.0, one of the first 50 books, I believe it was, written on social media strategy. And I know he's a frequent speaker at events like Content Marketing World, also contributes in blogs, Social Media Today. You can find him there, Dell Social Influencer, IBM Futurist. And what was this? Weren't you recently named like let's see, top 50 content marketers on Twitter was one of the accolades that so Bernie, thank you. We're just very pleased to have you with us here today talking about Twitter on this Blab session.
Cool. Well, thanks for having me. I love Twitter. I'm an early adopter of Twitter. I'm not an early adopter of Blab. This is only, I think, my third Blab. Okay. So I've been kind of slowly getting into the Blab world, but it's fun. I want to do more of it.
Yes, no, and for us, the Magnet Marketing Blab has been, something we started fourth quarter last year. So we just kind of got into it, 4 or 5 months now, and it's been a good platform for us, Jessica and I, to kind of do something together. And I guess I should say a little bit about my co-host. Jessica is president of Now Marketing Group in Lima, Ohio, and the Relationship Marketing System, which is an inbound marketing agency that partners with businesses to grow repeat referral business using relationship marketing. Of course, I am Mike Gingerich, and president of Digital Hill, digital marketing agency, also co-founder of TabSite, Facebook contest application, and also a founder of a nonprofit called I Give Global, where it's all about trying to be uncommon and make a difference. So we're here to talk Twitter for business today. And Jessica, I believe maybe you want to start it off with your first question for Bernie. How about that?
Sure.
Oh, I have to answer questions? I didn't know about that.
That's why we're your third Blab. We're going to break you in,
All right.
No, but I was really excited actually how this came about. I've seen your name everywhere. I've followed a lot of the content that you've been putting out, and I got a chance to hear you speak last week in Vegas, and it was a great session. So I appreciate all your thought leadership. And I knew I found out that you are an early adopter of Twitter, like you said, and that you've been featured on it. And I know for some businesses, at least around here, they're quick to jump into Facebook, but Twitter, sometimes it's that love-hate. And I wonder, as an early adopter, kind of what you've seen as what was then, but maybe what is now, and how businesses could, use Twitter effectively grow their business.
So Jessica, first of all, thank you for the background introduction. I enjoyed meeting you in Vegas at Social Media Strategy Summit. Except that night that you went out at the end of the event, and you took this great photo of all you guys having a good time, and I wasn't invited to that.
I'm so sorry.
Probably on my way to the airport anyway, so I couldn't make it.
I'm so sorry. Next time.
Next time. Okay, but so what was then and what is now? So can you clarify then? Because then, like the early days was around 2006, right?
Yes.
That's like really then.
Yeah. So even as I'm thinking like 5 years ago, when social media is really becoming more and more popular for all companies, it wasn't just like an option like, hey, you can go social, but now it's like, hey, you need to be social. People are searching there. Yeah. But when they're searching and they're looking at what social platforms, they're usually thinking like, we know we need to be on Facebook. And they're thinking that first, at least that's what I'm hearing. But sometimes they're not thinking Twitter. So what is our case for Twitter? Maybe if they hadn't considered it then 5 years ago to where now?
Yeah, well, I would say that more than anything, Twitter has definitely become mainstream. if you just watch television, especially with the political season that we're in, and you see, things like the Pope and Donald Trump getting into a war of words over Twitter, and that's not the first time that you see, examples like that, right? And you literally hear conversations on the news about so-and-so tweeted this and so-and-so tweeted that. And they're either celebrities or in this case, politicians. And even, when you get down to the CEO of GE, I mean, that's one of the largest corporations in the world. And he's not only on Twitter, he's active on Twitter. So we've reached a point where Twitter has become mainstream. But that said, even though it's mainstream, it's more mainstream than it was a few years ago, but it's still not so mainstream that all industries have adopted it. My observation is that most B2C companies, most B2C industries, you think of hospitality, like the Hyatts of the world and the Marriotts of the world. And of course, the airlines, the Southwests and, the Uniteds and the JetBlues of the world, they're very active. They've embraced Twitter, but a lot of B2B companies still haven't. And the other thing that I have noticed is that in years past, companies that were active on Twitter were active behind their logo, meaning they were tweeting as a brand. And over the last couple of years, give or take, we're seeing a lot more individuals within these brands become active on Twitter. Mm-hmm. But the big thing that I'm seeing is that a lot of them don't know how to do it, meaning you can kind of tell by the way that they tweet or they don't engage or they respond to a tweet 3 days later kind of a thing, that they don't really understand the medium yet. Yep. So while it's more mainstream than it used to be, there's still sort of a learning curve. And I'll say one more thing on this. And so you can respond. I'm sure you want to have follow-up conversation around this, but Twitter as a company is struggling right now. And it's a really interesting dynamic to watch because I don't know about you. I don't want them to go away. Even if they get acquired, as long as they continue to exist. So the fact that they're struggling, they've kind of admitted to the world, especially to Wall Street, that they haven't figured out how to grow. They haven't figured out how to make the tool, the platform, easier to use for everybody. Mm-hmm. So there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
Okay, and they went through some leadership transitions too here. I think that the leadership transitions, you can tell that they're in flux and trying to find their way at this point. So that's going to be a key as to where do they go from here.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you hit on a couple points that usually big brands, they were starting off and they were kind of going behind the logo and tweeting that way because it was a medium to push content out, but also to be active with just short, I call it the fast food restaurant of conversation. But now more and more brands I've seen, even with smaller brands, it is them. It is their team members. They're using it for more brand engagement, brand ambassadors, people to connect with the brand. I see IBM doing this quite a bit too, where all the individuals within a company, people are, falling in love with them as an overall, undertone to the tone of the brand itself and are growing that way. And that's why I love Twitter too, because you can get directly to the person, like directly to them. There's no, blog or whatever in between. I mean, Twitter, you get direct contact to who you're trying to talk to. And it's more of a, not just a marketing platform, but it's operations, it's customer service, it's brand engagement. It's growing so much more and evolving to much more than I think it ever knew that it was going to be, or maybe it did, but I love Twitter for those reasons. So how can people, I guess, or brands dive in and start figuring this out? You said one of their hesitancies is because they're finding it harder to use. What would you recommend for, how brands can use Twitter?
Well, first, Jessica, I'll take brands and I'm going to put them in two buckets.
Sure.
Okay. One bucket's B2C, one bucket's B2B.
Good.
Now, even within those buckets, right, there's lots of industries and we're not going to get that granular,
right? But
I'm just going to talk about those two buckets. On the B2C side, I think clearly the whole customer care application is just a no-brainer. It makes a whole lot of sense. One of, Mike, during your introduction of me, you mentioned my podcast, my Social Business Engine podcast. One of my recent guests, in fact, Jessica, you met him, was Ken Schneider from U-Haul. They're a 70-year-old brand, but only 4 years ago, they started actually engaging on social media. And the biggest application for them is to listen and respond to customers and to respond very quickly in real time. And I don't know if they're still doing it, but at one time, Best Buy had empowered their employees to also be very responsive to consumers that were asking questions, so that they weren't dependent on just the social media department, but any Best Buy employee. And again, I don't know if they're still doing that, because that was a few years ago when I learned of that, but I love that example. So on the B2C side, rather, I think the whole customer engagement and customer care thing is just a really obvious example. Hotels are another great example of that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I was going to ask you one question about that. I've seen with U-Haul and some other brands, they have two channels. They have one, like the U-Haul example, for example, they had one channel just for, U-Haul Cares, and the other one's just their regular channel. Do you think that's a good thing to have them split that way, or?
Absolutely. I see no reason not to. I think every brand really needs to decide how many different channels they have. Who wants to take a guess, not only among the two of you, but anybody else out there listening, who wants to take a guess at how many social media channels NASA has? Now, it's not limited to Twitter, so I'm broadening the topic a little bit so that we don't take too much of a tangent. Give me a guess.
Jessica?
I was going to say 20.
We got Terrence coming in with 10. I'm going to say 55.
You're saying 55. Keezer now, is that Terrence? Yeah, Terrence 10. Terrence, you lowballed it, man. Corey 30. Come on, it's 500.
One?
500.
One for every star?
Well,
what?
No, it probably have to be 5 billion for that.
Yeah, I'm just
Satellite.
kidding. Yeah,
no, again, it's not all Twitter. It's not all Twitter. But NASA has so many different initiatives that are going on. They couldn't possibly do everything that they need to do from a communication standpoint under one branded account for just NASA. So they have so many different initiatives, and most of those initiatives have both a Twitter account and an Instagram account, because they take so many, awesome images and they post them onto Instagram.
That's interesting.
So, but anyway, so that was a great little tangent. So let me now address B2B. I think one of, and it's not the only, but one of, I'll mention two of the best applications in B2B. One would be competitive insights, like just using a tool like a Hootsuite or a Buffer or TweetDeck or whatever tool you want to use. I'm not here to endorse any one of them. Create streams and follow what your competition is tweeting, and also add people to those streams as well, people within those companies, so you can follow what they're tweeting. And sometimes you can gain some really great insights. Another great example, so I'm actually going to give 3 now for B2B, is follow conferences, right? Yeah. Another one of my podcast guests, Tim Hughes from Oracle, he's in the UK. There was an Oracle conference that was being conducted in California. He was voted as the most engaging participant at that conference, even though he was at home in the UK.
That's awesome.
So following a conference and engaging with the people at the conference is an awesome way to use Twitter and B2B as well. And, identifying trends or even opportunities and people to go, follow up with. And then the third one is kind of maybe a mix of the two. And that's business development. And that's just setting up streams to follow the companies that you want to target, finding the people in those companies. And if they're on Twitter, because sometimes they're not going to be on Twitter, adding them to those streams and follow them and follow them and see if they'll follow you back, and then try to engage them in a really authentic, relevant, meaningful way. And then look for the right opportunity to direct message them, and do it in a way that is not going to come across as spammy or salesy or pushy or any of that, but just find that right opportunity to direct message them. And then maybe you can take that conversation offline, and then from a business development standpoint, begin to, have real, person-to-person conversations. So those are 3 ways that I've seen B2B companies successfully use Twitter.
And for those that may not, you mentioned streams, and I think that's a great idea. For those that may not be as in tune with setting up lists, can you explain what you mean by streams?
So we all know what a stream is, right? Like a river stream, right? So think of these streams as, think of it like a spreadsheet, right? Where you have columns, right? So each column you designate to be either according to like a keyword you want to follow. So you're just following that keyword. Or maybe you want to follow just a hashtag, and a good example of that is a conference where, like the conference we just attended recently, Jessica, so the hashtag for the Social Media Strategy Summit is SMS and then Summit, all one together. Hashtag SMS Summit. So if you want to follow that conference, you could follow it right now because that conference, hops around from city to city. So it's going all year long. So you can follow, what people are tweeting within a specific conference. So that could be one stream. Also, just, the companies you want to follow. Every company at this point, they have their own Twitter handles. So just put them into a stream and follow what they're tweeting. And like I said earlier, follow, the people that you want to follow within those companies and add those to those streams. You can also create a list. There's just a little button that you can click on, create a list, right? Name that list. You might want to keep it private. They give you that option of public or private so that nobody else can see it. And then add people to whatever that list is, So like we have a client in healthcare, and we help them create lists around doctors at specific hospitals. So we create a list that says doctors at XYZ hospital. And then as we find those hospitals, we put them on, as we find those doctors, we put them on that list. This way they can follow those doctors and what they're tweeting, because they're only going to be tweeting about the things that they care about, the topics they care about, right? And so this client wants to know what these doctors care about. Okay. In the context of running their business. So each one of those streams is just a different way to follow a conversation, if you will.
Yes. And it makes it real easy to get through the noise and just straight to see what you're interested in and what people that you need to connect with and make sure that you stay connected with them. I love lists personally, just to follow up with people from a conference, add them to a list, and then also clients maybe that you want to stay in touch with, or clients or prospects, but just make sure that you name it something that they're going to be excited to be added to, because they do get that notification that you are adding them to this list. So we'll say like awesome people in marketing, or thought leaders I admire, or something like that, and add them to that list because they're going to get that notification that you've added them there. And it's a way for you to say, hey, I'm noticing you and I respect you. And then save your time by going to the list, make sure you're engaging with who you want to engage with, and then you can go back.
Yep.
Spend your time wisely.
Absolutely.
Smart.
Okay, another question that's kind of related, and you can address this from B2B, B2C realm, and that is you hear businesses talking about, how do we really obtain leads from Twitter? And so, from Twitter, how do they move them to their website or to another property? And should that be where does that fit in terms of the overall goal of using Twitter for business?
Okay, so most of my experience is on the B2B side. So I'll start with B2B, and then if I get some little flash of brilliance in B2C along the way, I'll share it. But if I don't, I can't share what I don't have. But on the B2B side, a common example that we've seen with our clients is at events. So an event could be a webinar, right? So promoting the webinar through Twitter. And if you know the kind of people that you want to target for your webinar, which any good marketer should know what kind of people they're targeting for their webinar, then you can do your homework in advance and do some research, set up streams around that, and promote your webinar using hashtags that those people follow. And then even in a very professional way, you can even reply some of those people and just say, hey, based on, this topic, thought you'd like to know about this webinar, that kind of thing, and just make them aware of it. Selectively, you might want to do a little direct messaging selectively, because again, you can push the envelope there and come across a little bit too pushy if you push the envelope, but that's another potential option. But not just webinars, but conferences as well. Getting people to turn out to your conferences. We have a client who had not a conference per se, but a seminar. People actually still do seminars, by the way, not all webinars. And they needed to fill that seminar with a target audience. And so we put together a plan to identify, who they needed to reach. And over the span of about a month, we were able to reach those people through Twitter, and they sold out the seminar. Even it was a free seminar, but you know what I mean? They filled up the seminar. And that's exactly what they needed to achieve. And for them, that was a big win, because now they've got the audience in a room that they need to present to, and then they can convert that into, business value, right? and then they can come back and point to the fact that we leverage Twitter to get people to our event. So there's a direct correlation to ROI. And then on the B2C side, even though, again, it's far from my wheelhouse, but, just things like tweeting coupons and offers and building brand awareness with, specific calls to actions to take someone to a website or a landing page, that might have an offer. I mean, it can be as simple as, my dry cleaner's doing 30% off this week. And, if they tweet it at me, and they can target me geographically, by the way, because you can do that on Twitter. You can go to the geocodes thing and just target people through geographic zip codes. So from a B2C side, it's mostly promotional. And if you combine local into it too, and just, if I'm nearby the mall or whatever, and I see a tweet pop up because they recognize that I'm local, that's another way to maybe get me in the store.
I've actually had some recent success. We work with some B2C clients, and we've had some success using video. So just a quick video intro into whatever the offer is going to be, but then it stands out a lot, so it's going to take up a little bit more real estate, call attention to it, and make it more where you're wanting to click on it. And then just pinning the tweet simply, so as if maybe somebody else sees something interesting later on, they go back to your actual real estate, your Twitter page, and they see that first tweet up there that's been pinned. That's been helpful for me. And I know, Mike, you've done some stuff recently too with Twitter with your repeat. Maybe you'll drop that knowledge bomb real quick before we move into the next question.
With some scheduled tweets that go out in series kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that one of the things with Twitter for me is that you have to understand that, I mean, it's a stream, so people have to be on there to see it, and so they're not going to see a lot of tweets if they're following a number of people. So I try to make it a point of if I have something coming up, maybe I'm gonna pre-schedule a series of 5 or 6 of the announcements of this type of blab show and our special guest with Bernie coming up ahead of time, and send those out over the course of time. And I'm going to use a tool to do that. Again, one of those pieces there, but that's just a way to try to make sure different times, different places, different days that I might catch more of my audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You also, you mentioned, Jessica, video.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would be remiss if I didn't mention Periscope, which is owned by Twitter, right? So the way that you actually record a Periscope is you have to connect your Twitter account to Periscope. And so when you fire up your smartphone and you record a Periscope, that gets tweeted out. And then it gets saved, and you can just, share it. And so that's just another element to Twitter. And by the way, I really think Twitter needs to figure out how to really monetize Periscope. But anyway, I digress there. The whole concept or the whole notion that Twitter is struggling as a company, I think, that's one of the things they need to figure out.
But you're mentioning the thing with video and with Periscope and with things like this, it's all about getting kind of that more authentic, genuine relationship, straight to the brand, and the people are the brand, So how can people use Twitter to build even more of a relationship? We talked about following conferences and, staying in touch. What are some other ways to just make it even more relationship driven, even if it's a B2B brand?
Well, I always, one of the things that we give as guidance to our clients is to focus on having a minimum of 5 and ideally 10 touch points, digital touch points. And I say digital because it doesn't have to be limited to Twitter. It could be on LinkedIn, or it could be on, even Facebook, could be, elsewhere, right? But, since we were talking about Twitter, so if you are looking to build relationships, and there's people on Twitter that you specifically want to build relationships with, then, as I said earlier, create a stream where you can follow what they're tweeting. And so let's say they tweet a link to an article. Well, if it's an article they shared, then read the article and then reply with a little comment about the article. And don't ask for anything, just demonstrate that you read the article. Now, if they wrote the article, that's even better. Because if there's if there's an opportunity down at the bottom to leave a comment, then leave a comment on the article, and then retweet that article, and make sure you shout out the person. You basically you mention the person so that they know that, you're sharing their article, and again, demonstrate that you read it. So basically, I used a silly example and I've been using it forever. I'm sure you've used it many times. If you walk into a social event and there's people standing around in conversation, the best thing you can do is just get involved in that conversation and, contribute and become likable and like them and just kind of be human about it, be, really authentic about it. And if you just translate that, or transfer rather, that way of thinking over to Twitter and just touch people 10, 15, 20 times authentically, then, you've got a really good chance of at some point, getting offline and into a real conversation.
But they're going to start seeing your name over and over, especially if you direct mention them, because, you can't help, like that other saying, they say you can't, build it and they will come. You have to engage and, like you said, be memorable and be engaging, because they're going to notice that. And it's going to be a personal mention back to them. You may be reading their stuff, but they're not going to know unless you do mention them and follow up. So that's good advice. I like that.
Yep.
So what tools, or is there a few tools that you use, or cheats, if you will, to help businesses kind of manage Twitter for their brand?
So there's a few tools, and there's more tools out there that than I'm actually aware of, but there's a few that I use. I bounce between Hootsuite and TweetDeck. Mm-hmm. I also, because my agency is a HubSpot shop, we use HubSpot for marketing automation, and HubSpot actually has a pretty good scheduling tool within HubSpot. So within HubSpot itself, we schedule, so we can take 10 tweets and schedule that out over even 3 months if it's evergreen content. And the way that you do that in Hootsuite is a little bit different. So I like the way you do it in HubSpot better than the way you can do it in Hootsuite. But there's things I do like about Hootsuite. There's things I like about TweetDeck as well. I'm not a buffer user, but I know a lot of people that use it and like it. So I've heard a lot of good things about it. And then there's a few other tools out there. There's, I'm actually drawing a blank on it. So let me go pull it up here. Crowdfire. Yeah. Crowdfire is a pretty popular tool, and that's kind of to manage your followers and, kind of clean out people that are following you, but they're not active on Twitter, and then also find ways to follow more people. Manage Flitter is also a tool that's been around for a while, and that's another one that's very similar in terms of cleaning out, unproductive Twitter followers. And by that, I mean people that are not tweeting. So there's no sense having your Twitter, the number of followers that you're following, there's no sense in inflating that number if you're following people that are basically dormant on Twitter. You want to be following people that are active on Twitter. So that's a handful of tools. I mean,
say that last one again.
Go ahead, Mike.
Say that last one again that you use to check for people that are not active.
Manage Flitter.
Flitter?
Manage Flitter, yeah. So I'll type it in here.
Excellent.
Whoops, I left out the E. It's MANAGE. Typo.
Yeah, Jessica, did you say a little bit more about Communit then again?
You got it.
Communit does the same thing as Manage Flitter as well. It also lets you know who your most engaged members are in your community, which is awesome. So you can, they have a free version and then a paid version, but it lets you know who is your most engaging and who is your most influential. So you can see who is engaging with you. You can also see who is engaging, but maybe you haven't reached out to them in a while. So it kind of gives you a checklist of, hey, you haven't followed up with so-and-so in a month. You might want to say hi again, or you might want to reply back to this person that reached out to you last week. So it really does help you manage your relationships on Twitter, and so you can spend more of your time engaging the right way versus.
There's one other tool that I'm going to mention, and that's on mobile.
Oh, that's nice.
Twitter.com on mobile actually has gotten to be productive. It's really come a long way. So I go there and I'll not only will I check like recent notifications, but I'll check like what's going on right now. There's a section of it that I'm also drawing a blank on, so I'm going to pull it up here, called Moments. And now Moments is going to show you like what's going on around the world across fun, today, news, sports, entertainment, and that's it. And you can just kind of, check out that content. You can retweet it. You can share it, that kind of thing. It can be a little bit off topic because, we're all in a specific business and we may be focused on that. But it's just another way to just kind of check out what's going on within the world, of people using Twitter.
Okay.
Yeah, Twitter Moments is great. I've used that as well. It is great to kind of see what's happening. Kind of like a visual way of your news versus just the trending hashtags for your area. It's kind of worldwide. I love it.
I got another pretty practical question for small, medium-sized businesses, and that is, there's different types of tweets that you can put out. You can be just text-based, text with a link, image, and video. What do you want to say about those different types and, how they vary that in their mix of what they're tweeting?
Yeah, Mike, that's a great question. I actually am a big fan of including images, video as well. Anything that you can do to stand out in a stream, because anybody that is an active user of Twitter is going to have a pretty busy stream. And if they're creating specific streams and, you're in one of those streams, it's helpful to stand out by having images. So, for example, as we promoted today's Blab session, right? We included that, cool image that you created that was, here on the Blab, but we put it out on Twitter, and that was part of, the content that was shared. So I'm a big fan of that. And then, of course, including links to anything, especially links to other people's content, and then mentioning them so that they see that you're sharing their content. And as I said earlier, demonstrate that you read it. So like tweeting something and just copying the headline, while I'd be lying if I said I never did that, I prefer to demonstrate that I read it, and then if I retweet someone, I'll try to, here's a little tip that some people know about, some people don't. If you retweet someone and then the entire tweet's going to be too long, and you can't do it until you shorten it down, sometimes you have to shorten the original tweet. So if you change the R to M, and M stands for modified tweet, okay, it's just a little Twitter lingo. So instead of a retweet, now it's a modified tweet because you had to modify the original tweet. And whenever possible, I'll actually try to squeeze in a little comment in there. And sometimes it's just anything, as simple as love it or totally agree or whatever, just to, again, humanize it and demonstrate that I actually read it.
That's smart. That's a good tip. And that was what again? Modify. So instead of R, you do M?
M. Just replace the R with M, and M stands for modified tweet.
Great.
Yep. And okay, so let's see. So images, and I agree with that. I think that seems like images kind of get more engagement, stands out a little bit more, that type of thing. And what are you seeing with video? Are they and is it something that you see brands doing a lot? Is that in your sector of the B2B?
Don't see a lot with it. I think there's a lot more opportunity with that. And again, Periscope is one way to do video, but that's live. Yep. Okay. As opposed to recording video and then actually, using a link to a video in Twitter. I've not seen a lot of that. I think there's definitely room for growth in that. I see a lot more still images.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And audio. I think I've seen more podcasts too, and people using Twitter to promote that, find their niche, because Twitter allows you to find that niche really quickly and then draw it back to your podcast. But I've seen more brands, I feel more comfortable with podcasts, it seems, than diving into video, at least short video. There's still very much high quality video, but the human kind of off the cuff videos, they're still a little more reluctant to dive into because of the fear of it being live. And what if something is said,
Right. Exactly. Because you actually make a good point, Jessica. When you're, especially from a mobile device, you've got the option of recording video, but that's live in the moment.
Yep.
And a lot of brands, are really reluctant to do that. And the only people who can do that, right, are the people who are authorized to do that in some kind of a corporate communications role.
Yeah. Absolutely. But I think more of them are coming along. They're advocating their teams to be empowered to make some of those decisions, decide who to engage with, decide who to, to advocate for their brands. So I think they're kind of breaking down that wall a little bit. All right, we have a question here. So rumors of Twitter's demise are off base? Question mark.
So yeah, Deb, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, and Bernie, maybe you want to kind of restate just a little bit of what you see happening with Twitter right now.
Well, it's complex. I mean, they're a public company. I think here's a big piece of what I think is going on. Twitter is not something that is understood by Wall Street. Mm-hmm. And Wall Street, the people in Wall Street are the ones who largely influence the opinion of a stock, any stock. Mm-hmm. Okay. And so I see articles that say Twitter's user growth has stagnated. And when you compare that with Facebook's growth, well, Facebook and Twitter are apples to oranges. Facebook is at 1.5 or whatever billion, and Twitter is stuck at 320 million. And Wall Street looks at that and says, this is an underperforming stock, and we don't see it for them. But they're two very different platforms. So I think, Jack Dorsey came back in. He was one of the original three co-founders or two co-founders. I don't remember how many there were. I think it was two of them, he and Biz Stone. And he came back, but he's also CEO of Square. So is it Square? Yes. It is Square. So he's CEO of two technology companies, which is an interesting thing. Now they happen to be literally down the street from each other, but that aside, so he did a layoff, okay, because their revenues and profits are declining. They just haven't figured out a way to really bring Twitter to the mainstream. They've actually hinted at permitting up to, are you ready for this? 10,000 character tweets.
Yes, I heard
which basically is like a blog post, right?
I don't like it.
Which is crazy. So I'm going to use this opportunity to give you my prediction.
Okay.
There's been a lot of speculation that Google might buy them, and that may in fact happen. But personally, I think IBM will buy them. And I'll tell you why. IBM's big play right now as a company is in cognitive computing. If you know anything or follow anything about what they've done with IBM Watson, which is a combination of hardware and software that is very intelligent and can sort of predict consumer behavior, and has done some amazing things. They had that famous chess match where Watson beat like the best chess player in the world. And IBM already has a business relationship with Twitter. They're already collaborating. It's not like they're strangers. They're anything but strangers. They have a very strategic relationship. And I think the data that Twitter has is part of the web's, especially social media's, unstructured data. And if anybody can harness that, it's IBM. So I think IBM is the one that will acquire them.
Okay.
My speculation.
All right.
That's a good prediction, though. And I think the other question that came in, I think you answered this in your last answer, but Bernie, do you think Twitter needs to show better ROI on its ad platform? I feel like this is where the hurt is coming from. So the question is ad ROI.
I think that's a short-term thing. I think the problem with that is that advertising is exactly the same revenue stream that all of the social media companies are trying to monetize. Now you see Facebook doing it successfully. Of course, Google, has become a behemoth just on Google AdWords. So the expectation from Wall Street is that Twitter needs to monetize, through advertising. And while I definitely think that there's room for improvement there, I think that they need to find other revenue streams. For example, there are people like us in the agency world who could get certified to teach businesses how to use Twitter. So why not charge a certification fee? And then why shouldn't Twitter actually provide the education the material, the educational material, hand it over to people who are certified, and then they get 10 cents on the dollar. Now, would that, be a huge revenue stream? No, but if there's more people teaching users how to use Twitter, then they're growing their user count.
Yep.
And then perhaps they can have more advertising revenue.
Exactly.
That's just one little example of other ways, to be thinking about monetization beyond just pure advertising.
Exactly. Yeah. They don't have the John Loomers and the Mari Smiths and all of those on Twitter showing how to use the ad platform, but it would be nice.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you think about Facebook, you can name 3 or 4 people, John Loomer, Mari Smith, Amy Porterfield, maybe there's a few others, right, that are like the Facebook teachers, right? Who is it for Twitter?
Yeah. I mean, you have some that are really good at what they do, but the ad platform is completely different, So we just gave somebody a niche idea. Go become an expert at Twitter ads, and you will make a name for yourself right there. But all right, Bernie. Well, we want to be respectful of your time. This has been great insight. I appreciate it, especially coming from the B2B realm. I mean, you are one of the expert in B2B for Twitter. So I appreciate your wealth of insight with us. Can you leave in the comments here and also tell everyone where they can find you and stay connected if they have more questions later on?
Sure. Well, my Twitter handle is my name at Bernie Borges. So that's probably the easiest, fastest way to reach me is just my Twitter handle.
Excellent.
Great. Any finishing thoughts?
Excellent. We're just thrilled that you've been here with us today, Bernie. I just want to say thank you. It's been good to just hear your insights for Twitter for Business.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for having me, Mike and Jessica. I've enjoyed it. It's always fun.
Thank you. And as Mike said, this is a weekly Magnet Marketers where we teach you how to become a magnet with your business versus being a bullhorn. And next week, we're going to be diving into Instagram. So I hope to have you back here next week. The week after, we'll be going into Snapchat with Carlos Gill and then Facebook ads with Brian Carter. So we hope you will join us each week and be sure to follow up. We will put the link to the recap log to this article here in 24 hours. So you'll have it tomorrow to recap all the notes that we've taken today. Thanks again, Bernie. We hope to see all of you back next week.
Take care, folks.
See ya. Thanks.
X out. Take care, Bernie.